As I said in the last lecture, the Bible is front-loaded with all kinds of symbolic stuff, and all that symbolic language is there to give us a way of thinking. You know, your and my ability to think about the world is dependent on us having a world picture that everything fits into. And the Bible gives us a series of world pictures that things fit into to help us to understand stuff. And it does so by giving it to us in symbolism that kind of structures how we think about the world. But we, of course, are afraid of symbolism. So before we start, say, I'm not afraid of symbolism. I'm not afraid of symbolism. Good. Say, I'm not afraid of typology. I'm not afraid of typology. Say, I'm going to give $100 to Jim Jordan's ministry. No. Well, almost worked. Now, we read in Genesis that God planted a garden on the east side of the land of Eden, and that a river flowed out of Eden, and then it went down into the land of Havilah, where there's gold and stuff. Eden has food, Havilah has gold and onyx stone and bdellium. No one knows what that is. The mystery rock. Okay? So what we have here is we have the world, and within the world we have the land of Eden, and on the east side we have the Garden of Eden. And we have a river that arises in Eden, and then it flows through the garden, and then it breaks up into 4 streams. Okay? One of them is the Tigris, one of them is the Euphrates, one of them is the Pishon, which turns out to be the Jordan, if you trace it out, and the other is the Gihon, which is a little river after the flood in the area of Egypt. So that's basically what it looks like. Now, what this gives us is, since rivers flow downhill, we agreed on this. Rivers flow down. Say river? No. All right. Then the land of Eden is high ground, and then we come down to the garden, and then we go down to the rest of the world. Okay? Eden, garden, slope, and world. Other lands out here, okay, and below the land is water, which we don't have much room to make some water here, but that's it. All right? These are the zones of the world. Land, sea, mountain, garden, and Eden. Okay? Those 5 areas are reproduced in the tabernacle and the temple and the other structures in the Bible. And we'll say just a teeny weeny bit about that in just a minute. Now, we talked about maturation and development. When God created Adam, Adam watched God plant the garden, and then God put Adam into Eden, right? No. God put Adam into the Garden of Eden. Now, Adam is supposed to grow and mature and become a king, and where's he going to go? Upstream to the throne land of Eden. But Adam sinned, so he got kicked out downstream. This way. This is fundamental biblical geography. Everything is on this axis because this is the east part of Eden, and later on the tabernacle is built in such a way that you're moving this way when you come into it. Okay? This is equivalent to the Holy of Holies in here that we don't ever get into. This garden is equivalent to the holy place. This mountainside is like the altar. Then there's the land where we live as Israelites, and the sea where the Gentiles live. That's the world picture throughout the Old Testament. Now, there are 3 falls or three stages in the fall of mankind. This is laid out in Genesis. The first rebellion against man, against God, is in the garden. Okay? That's Genesis 3. And in that garden, Adam rebelled in the area of worship. You have two sacramental trees in the center of the garden. One is the tree of life. He is freely invited to go to the tree of life. The other is the tree of kingship, and he is told to keep his hands off the tree of kingship until he's mature enough. Okay, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Tree of life and the tree of death. Death being the passage, good death, you see, good death being the passage into kingship. And Adam sins in this religious area, and I'm going to say he essentially sins against God the Father. What it means for God to be a father, for God to create Adam and to bring a girl to him and to marry him, that's father stuff, okay? And to give him rules and to give him laws and say, for your own good, stay away from that tree. That's father stuff. Adam rebels against God the Father. Well, okay, he's kicked out, and then we find that he's living in a land. It's not the high land of Eden, it's out here in an outside land. And in this land, he has two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain murders Abel in the land. Okay? This is a sin against God the brother. God comes to Cain and says, hey, where's Abel? He says, don't be angry. Why is your countenance fallen? Where's your brother? God is coming to him as the older brother. And Cain rebels against the older brother, and it's a brother-brother sin. Now we got sin number one, which we will call by the word sacrilege, which means stealing from God. S-A-C-R-I-L-E-G-E. The second sin, brother murder, the $64,000 word for that is fratricide. Okay? And it's essentially a sin against the idea of brotherhood, of sonship, of God the brother, Jesus, the older brother. Well, Cain is sent out into a land of wandering. He's sent out into the world. And the next great sin we find is in the world. Now we find in Genesis chapter 4 that there are two groups of people that come from Adam. There's Seth, who is a replacement for Abel, and the people who come from him, who are the sons of God, and then we have those who are coming from Cain. And we come down in chapter 6 of Genesis, we find, this is Genesis 4, this is going to be Genesis 6. We find that there is only one righteous Sethite left in the world, and that's Noah. Well, what happened to the rest of them? Well, some have said angels came down and married with women. But that doesn't tell you anything about what happened to the righteous line of Seth. Others have said powerful kings called sons of God were taking all the women. But there again, that doesn't tell you what happened to the righteous line of Seth. The fact is, sons of God is a routine word in the Bible for believers. And the sons of God marrying the daughters of men is the third great sin. It's the sin of compromise or of intermarriage. I'm going to call it compromise. Tonight we'll call it compromise. The sons of God, the descendants of Cain, they saw that the pagan girls were pretty, and they wanted to marry the pretty pagan girls instead of the ugly Christian girls. No, did I say that? Okay. Well, that's what they thought. They were wrong. And they all did. Now, there's other dynamics there. If you read carefully the names in Genesis 4, the names of Cain's descendants are all powerful names. They are names of ruling. And it's evident that the aristocrats and the rulers in this world were the descendants of Cain, and, the poor folks, the poor believers, they wanted to marry, the girls from the upper classes. And this happens all the time. But that's what happens. They commit the sin of compromise, and God says, okay, that's it. I'm going to wipe out the world. So, for the sin of rebellion against, and what does he say here? He says, my spirit will not always strive with man. What is the Spirit striving to do? The Spirit is the matchmaker. The Spirit wants to bring the Christian girls and the Christian guys together. Okay? He's the matchmaker, the matchmaking Spirit. He's the one who comes from the side to bring the bride to Christ. That's what He's doing with us. The Spirit is the one who brought you to Christ. Right? Okay? He's the matchmaker. Okay? So He is striving against this sin of intermarriage and compromise. Now you may be saying, I'm not sure you've got all that right. Well, we don't want to read those passages and stay here till midnight. I think this will become clearer as I show you how this happens again and again and again in the Bible. Now, these are the three sins. Commit the sin of sacrilege, you get kicked out of the garden, the worshiping place. Commit the sin of brother murder, and you get kicked out of the land, and you become landless. You go into the land of Nod, which means wandering. You're out in the world, okay? Commit the sin of intermarriage in the world, and you get kicked off the world. The flood comes, and you're gone, man. You're toast, or you're melted, or whatever, water. I'm melting, whatever. Then you're gone, and God starts over again. Now, this happens over and over. For instance, when we come out of Egypt, and God gives us the tabernacle, the main emphasis is on the worship system. And what is the main sin in the book of Judges? Going out after other gods. And eventually, at the end of that period, in the early chapters of Samuel, we find that God tears down the tabernacle. He lets the Philistines have the Ark of the Covenant, and it is 100 years before God puts the tabernacle back together again. It's 100 years from Eli to Solomon building the temple. Because you get kicked out of the garden. And during those 100 years, you cannot do the worship system that's in Leviticus. Now, after 20 years or so, they get this is going to go over the heads of a few of you, but as you learn the Bible more and more, you'll listen to these tapes over and over again, you'll hear it. God allows the Holy of Holies to have its own shrine and tent in one place, and the holy place and the altar to have their shrine and tent in another place. So that a little bit of sacrifice can be offered at the altar in the holy place, and you can have the Holy of Holies. David takes the Holy of Holies to Jerusalem, to Zion. The holy place and the altar are over in Gibeon. You say, well, but you see, some of the sacrifices require that those things be together. In fact, does anybody know the most important sacrifice for sin during the entire year, which requires that those two things be together? The Holy of Holies and the holy place and the altar. They've all got to be together in one place. The Day of Atonement, yes, the blood has to be animal killed out here and the blood taken all the way into the Holy of Holies and also in the holy place. So what that means now is that for 100 years they can't do the Day of Atonement. What does that mean? It means every year the sins are piling up, man. Bad scene. Okay. You don't want this. So, just as God kicked Adam and Eve out of the garden, so at the end of this first period of history, when they keep going after other gods, they keep rebelling against God the Father, God kicks them out of the garden, so to speak, by making it impossible for them to do the full garden sanctuary ritual, only little ways. Well, that's the Sinai period of history. When you move into the kingdom period and the temple is built, what's the stress during this period? Brother. What happens in David's household? Brother murders brother. Brother rapes sister and then refuses to marry her, which he should have done, actually. You're not supposed to have sex with your sister, but if you do, you got to make good on it. So that sin is even worse. Gross stuff in the Bible. That's what makes it so much fun to read. But, okay, this brother, and it's written large. I'm just kidding now. It's written large when you have the kingdom itself divided into north and south, and they're fighting all the time. This is Cain and Abel time. And the sins during this time are not so much idolatrous sins as they are oppression of the poor. And at the end of this period, God says, okay, I'm kicking you out of the land. This is in the land, okay? I'm kicking you out of the land into the world, just like Cain. So he takes them out of the land and into the world, into the Babylonian world. They leave the land. Just as Cain, for committing murder, brother sin, is kicked out of the land and into the world, so Israel, for committing all this brother stuff, right down to the end, is kicked out. In the book of Jeremiah, it tells us what the last straw was. And God says, okay, that's it. You get no more chances. Does anybody know in Jeremiah 34 what the last straw was? The straw that broke the camel's back? And God says, okay, you're out of here. No more chances. Ooh, you really got to know your Bible well to know this. So, that's okay. Genesis, that's why I'm here. No, that's why I have this, in my head. There's all kinds of stuff that if you asked me about I couldn't answer, but this one I'm prepared on. During the siege of Jerusalem, they said, oh, we better let all our slaves go free. So they let all their slaves go free. And God said, okay, all right, I'll give you another chance. So Nebuchadnezzar left the city and went off to fight Pharaoh, and as soon as he lifted the siege, they took all their slaves back. And that's when Jeremiah says, you know what? You guys are toast. Well, yeah, I've had it. You're out of here. So when Nebuchadnezzar's army took over the city and General Nebuzaradan conquered Jerusalem, what did he do? He freed all the slaves and gave land to the poor. He did all the things that God would do because he was a converted believer who Daniel had evangelized, okay? He's a good guy. And he goes and rescues Jeremiah, okay? Fratricide, the brother sin in the land is all over the kingdom period. And it results at the end in the palace being torn down and them being kicked out into the land. Then we move to the third phase of Israel's history, the prophetic phase, which is in the empire. Some of them move back into the Holy Land, but they're still spread out in the empire. And what are they supposed to do? They're supposed to bear witness and not compromise. What is the great sin? When you read Ezra and Nehemiah, what does Ezra condemn them for doing? Intermarrying with the pagans so that the children are growing up and they don't even speak Hebrew anymore. What does Malachi condemn them for? Divorcing the wife of your youth and taking up with some cute young pagan thing. The sin of intermarriage and compromise. What's going on in the book of Esther? Mordecai says, the king's collecting wives, huh? Well, you know what? I got a cute niece here, and if I could get her into the king's palace, we could have influence. Now, Esther, don't tell him you're a Jew. Keep it a secret. And you can get in there and we'll have influence. But God has other plans. God forces Esther to reveal who she is. As a result, she bears witness and God delivers His people. But when they compromise and don't bear witness and conceal who they are and say, oh, I'm not a Christian. I'm just a little old Babylonian girl. Judgment comes, you see. Can't have that. That's the theme in this period here. So these three falls, the rebellion against God the Father, the refusal to act in a brotherly fashion and understand what it means for God to be our brother, refusal to hear the Holy Spirit and marry the right way and instead compromise, these are the three sins. Now this happens over and over again in the Bible, okay? These, for instance, we've got three great stories in the book of Genesis that come after the Tower of Babel. The story of Abraham, the story of Jacob, Isaac is a transitional figure, and the story of Joseph. Where does the story of Joseph take place? In the land, in the world, or around an altar? In the world. What's his big test? Is he going to be involved with Potiphar's wife or not? Okay? Is he going to compromise, or is he going to bear true witness to these Gentiles? Okay? So we've got that one checked off. This is Joseph here. How about Jacob? What's the Jacob story about? Is it about worship at altars, or is it about wrestling with brothers? Yeah, kind of obvious, isn't it? Okay? And which of the three, Abraham, is about altars? Abraham's always going around building altars and leading in true worship. You see? Abraham doesn't commit sacrilege. Jacob doesn't commit brother murder, and he manages not to get murdered. Joseph doesn't compromise. Now, if you look at the book of Judges, you'll find the last three judges are Gideon, Jephthah, and Samson. Gideon puts up a false ephod, and all Israel plays the harlot with it, and bad worship starts up. Jephthah is all about his brothers. Winds up in a fight with the Ephraimites. Of course, they picked the fight, but it's still all brother stuff. And Samson, it's all about women. And God makes Saul king of Israel. In chapter 13 of 1 Samuel, Samuel says there's going to come a time when you're going to need to ask the Lord's blessing because the enemy is going to be around you. On that day, Saul, remember, you are a king. You must not offer sacrifices. You must wait for me. Be patient, Saul, and wait. Do not seize forbidden fruit and do it yourself. Wait for me. Saul waits 7 days, and he decides he'll offer the sacrifice himself, and of course Samuel shows up right away. Remember that? What kind of sin is that? You got it. The next chapter we have the second sin of King Saul. In chapter 14, that's where Jonathan, he says, don't anybody eat anything. Jonathan gets some honey. Saul decides to want to put him to death. This is brother stuff. It's father-son, but it's brother. They're both warriors, and the other warriors stop it. In the next chapter, Saul defeats Agag, king of the Amalekites, but decides to spare him and create an alliance with him. Marriage with the pagans. This triad is consistent through the Bible. I could give you lots of other illustrations, but I don't need to, because for a mere $3.50, you can take some home. Now, you see, this is a big handle on the whole Bible. And there's lots more we can do with it. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. No other gods. Okay? Don't set up any graven images. And then the third one is, don't carry around God's name in an empty fashion. Now, in other words, don't compromise. Now you may say, what does graven images have to do with brother-brother relationships? So it's a little bit more subtle. But the fact is, in cultures where people talk to idols, they don't learn how to get along with other people. That's why Eastern Orthodox Christianity does not have much cultural development as regards the interrelationships between people. That's why family life is at a very low level in places like Russia. Those people talk to icons, and icons don't talk back. That's what's nice about them. If you talk to another person, they'll talk back to you. And then you have to learn to get along. But if you just take it out and talk to an icon who never talks back, just sits there, that's easy. That's the social and cultural danger of an icon-oriented religion. And if you look at it, in the kingdom period of Israel, that's where the religious sin is to put up high places. And what are they doing on those high places? Worshiping other gods? No. They're worshiping Yahweh with statues. Okay? The sin in the Judges period is to worship other gods. The sin in the kingdom period is to worship the Lord using statues. So they put these shrines up there, and they have a little statue of Yahweh and of Yahweh's wife and of his kids and everybody else, and they bring flowers and incense up there to that. Okay? That's the sin. And right along with that goes thematically this brother-brother strife. Now that we have a handle on this, another thing that you can see is that there is a fourth phase when we move through this history, and that is judgment and renewal. Judgment and, we're going to call it resurrection. So, we have the sin of Adam, the sin of Cain, the sin of the Sethites, and then we have the flood. And after the flood, we start again. And this is a Sabbath judgment, okay? We have Abraham. He shows us what it's like to be patient and not put your hand on the tree of knowledge. We have Jacob. He shows us what it's like to be wise and not get killed by your vicious brother. We have Joseph. He shows us how we should interact with the Gentiles and how to be a prophet. And then we come to Moses. And we get a judgment on all of this situation and a new start. We have the Sinaitic period of the judges, the kingdom period, the prophetic period in the empire, and then we had Jesus. And Jesus says in the book of Hebrews, it's time to move out, leave that all behind, and go into this new place that I'm taking you to. This happens over and over again, and what is the fourth commandment? The Sabbath day. Move into the Sabbath. So this structure is throughout the Bible in lots of different ways. And if you can kind of get a handle on that, you'll begin to see, you'll begin to get a better handle on the whole movement of the Bible. Now, as we close, let me do this. This is going to be a parallel way of saying the same thing, but in different language. Okay? We might have started here, but instead we'll end here. How many testaments are there in the Bible? Somebody knows. Well, it depends on how you count, but there are 4 testaments in the Bible. There is a set of 6 books, Genesis through Joshua, which tell one story. And then there are hundreds of years when nothing more is written. And during all that period of the Judges, what they have is Genesis through Joshua, and they read and study that over and over again. And this book is primarily, this testament is primarily priestly. It tells you how to worship. That's the main focus on it. This first testament we can call priestly. Then the kingdom comes, and we have another bunch of stuff written. A New Testament, which consists of the Psalms and wisdom literature, and that is kingly. Do you want the big words? This first one is hieratic, and this one is basilic. Oh yeah, bring that out on your friends. Which is the Basilic Testament, Joe? All right. Then we have another several hundred years when nothing else is written, and then God starts something new with Elijah. He starts the remnant covenant. He starts the prophets. And when Elijah is taken out to Mount Sinai, God does something really brand new. When God brings Elijah out to Mount Sinai and says, okay, I'm going to start it up again with you and the 7,000 who haven't bowed their knee. And we're at Mount Sinai, and God passes in front of him just like he passed in front of Moses. Remember all that? And God says, this is what we're going to do. You're going to go back and you're going to do this. You're going to anoint Elisha to be your assistant. Okay, that's cool. Moses had Joshua. And you're going to deal with, you're going to call up a new king to replace the house of Ahab. Jehu, okay, we've had kings before, and you are going to go to Damascus and anoint Hazael king of Syria. Whoa. All of a sudden, God is grabbing hold of these other nations. This is a new thing. It's no longer just Israel. This starts the Gentile thing. So the prophets start saying things to the Gentiles, and you read the prophetic books, they're starting to say things to these other nations. Okay? And we have another bunch of things written after that, which is the prophetic. And over here, it's prophetic. We don't have a cool word for that one. I'm sure we could come up with one. All right? Now, then there's one more New Testament added on, and that is, of course, what we call the New Testament. Again, you've got a period of time in between each one of these. This one is priestly, it's about worship. This one is kingly, it's about rule. This one is prophetic, and during this time, the Jews don't rule, do they? Once again, it's kind of like being priests among the nations. In this New Testament is kingly because Jesus is king, and now he's king among the nations. So, priest in one land, king in one land. Priest, prophet among the nations in the whole world. King among the nations in the whole world. Okay? Now, what are the four faces of the cherubim? If we read Ezekiel chapter 1, we find that the cherubim all have ox, lion, eagle, and man face. Okay? Which does the lion go with? Yes, lion. Which does the ox go with? The ox goes with the priest. In Leviticus, if a priest sins, he brings an ox. If a layman sins, he brings a sheep or a goat. But if a priest sins, he brings an ox. Which goes with the prophets? Well, we know that the man has to go with the New Testament, right? Okay, man, who is over all the animals. So the eagle goes here. And we can find eagle associated with the prophets. Now, each of these is higher than the rest. You know, an ox, it just goes along like this, looking at the ground, plods along. Lion bounds along. He's got much more dominion. The eagle soars above everything, but man is over all, right? Genesis 2. You're over everything, including the eagles. So, maturation. Okay. In Leviticus chapter 8 and 9, in chapter 8, Leviticus 8:23. Leviticus 8:23. Okay, he put some of the blood on Aaron's ear, thumb of his right hand, and big toe of his right foot. The ear for hearing, the hand for action, the foot for going places. Which of these three focuses on traveling and going places? Prophet, of course. Prophets are roaming around the empire. Which one is about action and warfare? Oh yeah, you bet it. And which one is full of laws that we need to hear? Obviously the priestly is ear-oriented. And then, well, if these are three kinds of circumcision, then this is the circumcision of the whole man. All right, we won't go into that because we want to pass on and add something on to it, okay? Circumcision of person. You have the circumcised ear, the circumcised thumb, the circumcised foot, and the whole person now, death and resurrection. All right? Which of the Gospels shows Jesus as a man of action, immediately going here, immediately going there? He starts off in this gospel with him busting demons and crushing them and delivering people and healing them. Which gospel? Mark. Which gospel is full of long sermons? Matthew. Which gospel is full of a long travel narrative where Jesus is always going places? Luke. And which gospel is different from all the rest? John. So you see, this part of the Bible is written in Hebrew, this part is written in Hebrew, this part is written in Hebrew, and the fourth part is written in tongues. Okay? Tongues, a language other than Hebrew. By men of other tongues I will speak to you. Okay? So here are all these Jews. They expect to hear the revelation in Hebrew. They're forced to hear it in Greek. Okay? So in a sense, this is one aspect of what that gift of other languages was about, that they're forced to hear it in this new language. And that means that now the gospel will go into all the languages. It authorizes that. All right? So this is also a picture of how the Bible is put together and these themes that you can look at. Okay? And you'll find that, maybe there's an emphasis on the sin, religious sin here. Sin against the Father, garden. And an emphasis on kingdom here, and brothers, and healing, and fighting those brother demons. Here in Luke, an emphasis on dealing with Gentiles. And women. Women are in Luke much more than they are in the rest. Marriage, Gentiles, other stuff. And in this one, the Sabbath, the climax, the beginning of a brand new world. Big change in emphasis in John, When Jesus stands before Pilate in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he doesn't say anything. In John, he has quite a lot to say. There's big emphasis change in these Gospels. John is the victorious Jesus who tells them all along that he's I am. Here he's keeping it secret. Doesn't make it as a contradiction, it just means a big change in emphasis. Well, see, this is a lot of how the Bible is put together. We've looked at various themes, and I've just kind of tossed this up at the end. One more way to get a handle on how God has put it all together. And as I say, some of what I've just been saying, not the cherubim stuff, but some of the rest of it is in here, and you might want to pick it up if you have enough money to afford it. Well, we can take questions for about 7 minutes, and you can see I can try to make things more confused than they already are.
Explain how you said that Michael was Jesus.
Uh-huh.
Could you explain that?
Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, comes into history as the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament, or as Jehovah or Yahweh. No man has seen the Father. So anytime God appears in the Bible, it's the second person of the Trinity who's appearing. So in the Old Testament, it's Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, who shows up in Mount Sinai, who meets with Moses, who meets with Joshua, who appears in Joshua and says, I am the captain of the Lord's host. Later on, this pre-incarnate Jesus is given the name Michael. But the things that are said about him, the way he is revealed, and putting passages together, it's clear that Michael is a name for the angel of the Lord, and thus the pre-incarnate Jesus. The reason in the book of Revelation Jesus is pictured as Michael is because he's leading the good angels. See, he wears different hats. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a teacher. I could have different names. Sometimes kings have had different names who did different things. In the Bible, Darius the Mede is the same person as Cyrus the Persian. The Medes called him Darius, and the Persians called him Cyrus. Okay? Cassius Clay is the same person as Muhammad Ali. His mama called him Cassius Clay, and everybody else called him Muhammad Ali. The angels called him Michael. We call him Jesus. So when he leads the angels, he's Michael. Now Gabriel is another angel. Okay, what we learn from Daniel is that the various nations had angelic overlords, angelic supervisors, because this was the childhood of the human race, and angels are teachers, and they're over us. So Michael is the angel who is over Israel. And other angels are over the other nations, and sometimes those angels are on God's side, like when Hiram was king of Tyre. Sometimes they're enemy angels. Gabriel is the angel who is over the empire. So when God sets up his empire in Daniel, that statue empire, Gabriel is the angel who's over that. But that seems to be who they are. Okay.
I'm just a little bit confused about Adam and is it a good thing? It's not a good thing that he ate from that tree, but you're saying he wasn't ready. I'm just confused about what you were saying about...
The sin was to eat prematurely. The sin was for him to eat on his own terms instead of waiting for God.
So he really was created to go up, is what you're saying, but he just did it too soon.
Right. And then, it's like anything else. That once he done it, once he had to done it, God honored it. Said, okay, I'm not going to let you up into the high ground, and I will protect you from the demons, but you're going to have to go out into the rough outer world. You're not really ready for it yet. It's the same as if your 10-year-old kid disobeys you and takes the car out for a joyride. Well, once he's got down the street and made a couple of turns, he's out there. He can't suddenly get back easily. And in Adam's case, there's no way back. There's only a way forward into something that waits for Jesus to come. So, if you seize, or it's like a man who, a young man who thinks, I'm as smart as all the older men around, and he pushes his way into being in charge of a corporation when he's 25. Well, that's not real smart. It's a whole lot better to have a whole lot of experience under you and be put in charge of a corporation when you're 52 than when you're 25. But now he's in charge, and he's got to deal with it. That's, in a way, the sin and the punishment. There's more to be said, but that's what Adam does. That's the folly of it. He should have waited till he was old enough. Then he would have had the maturity and the wisdom to handle it.
Do we have angels today?
Oh, you mean like on TV? Or in any other way? Oh, there are angels, but I think they're retired. I think that Jesus comes in the place of the angels. It's in Hebrews chapter 1. God who at sundry times and in diverse manners spoke in times past unto the prophets and to the fathers, through the prophets to the fathers, has in these last days spoken unto us in the Son, who is better than the angels, higher than the angels. And so the whole point seems to be that the things that angels did, now Jesus does, but we still have some people. We are all prophets because we can all talk to God and advise God. Okay? He wants to hear our advice. He wants to make us members of His council. Those are aspects of prophecy. That's what prayer is. We meet together to discuss things. That's a prophetic council meeting. And there are certain people are more gifted at healing. Certain people are more gifted at administration. Some people are more gifted at discerning the times and saying just exactly what needs to be said to change everybody's mind. The person who can do that, you can call somebody with a special prophetic talent, whatever language you want to use. Somebody like Luther or Calvin, who could look at it and say, this is exactly what's wrong with all this stuff, and this is what we ought to do. And everybody says, yeah, okay, I see it. Or Karl Marx, an anti-prophet who did the same thing. So there certainly are people with more prophetic side to their gifting. And there are people with more apostolic side. That is, they can really have a strong sense of the foundations of things. There are people who are more evangelistic, and there are people who are more pastoral. The church exists in these four directions. It has an apostolic side, which looks to the past. It has an evangelistic side that looks to those who are outside. It has a pastoral side, which rules those who are inside. So, what did I say? apostolic, and it has a prophetic side that looks to the future. And the whole church has to have those four dimensions: apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic, and pastoral. But some people are going to be more one way or the other. So in your church, there are probably some people who are always thinking about evangelism. And there's some people who are always dissatisfied and wanting to change things. Those are the prophets. And there's some people who really want to get the church grounded in the tradition. Those are the apostles in your church.
Do you have a recommendation in the order in which you read the Bible?
Yeah, start in Genesis. What we should really do is pass a law that for 5 years you may only read Genesis through Joshua over and over again. See? And then you get this foundation. Then for the next 5 years you can add this New Testament here. And then you begin to really see how it adds on and glorifies and transfigures what was said before. And then 5 years. We don't do that. What we have all been taught is to start way at the end here and then try to read back. We start with Paul, which is the last part, and read back. But what we really want to do is try to get this, and then get this, and get this, and then get this. If we could do that, that's an ideal. Obviously, you can't do that, but at least part of your thinking, always remember the Bible is set up this way. And that when the Psalms were written, when Ecclesiastes was written, it was written to people who were real steeped in this part. And Ecclesiastes is not some mysterious book of philosophy. Ecclesiastes is all about the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles is literally the Feast of Clouds. That's what Sukkoth means. So you get branches down out of a tree and you make a little lean-to. Those branches up on that tree are a cloud. And you make a tree house down here out of those branches. You got your own little cloud. After a week, it disintegrates. But God in His cloud, in His tabernacle, it goes on and on. So Solomon says, doesn't say vanity of vanities. He says mist, mist, all is mist. We're talking about clouds. And all the things you make, they disintegrate. Even your body disintegrates. Right? At the end of Ecclesiastes, your body is a cloud and it disintegrates. Who can shepherd the wind when everything is mist? God can shepherd the wind. And then he says, well, even though everything is falling apart all the time, there's one thing that God has given you as a gift, and that is to eat, drink, and be merry, because that's the gift of God. That's a quotation from Deuteronomy 14 describing what you do at the Feast of Tabernacles. Bring wine and strong drink and make merry before the Lord. So the whole book of Ecclesiastes is written to people who do the Feast of Tabernacles, and it reflects on it. But people forget that, so they read Ecclesiastes as if it was some piece of philosophy. It's not. It's about worship and life. So that's why things like this, I think, are helpful to remember where you are in the Bible. Where are you on the map as you're reading? And try to remember when you read Samuel or Kings that those books were written to people who had all this. And so that's what's in their brain.
Let's thank Jim for coming to share with us this weekend.